Hey everybody, welcome to Glitchy Pancakes. We'll talk about the world of fandom. I'm Rob,
I'm Jesse.
and today we're talking about harassment and abuse in the industries of fandoms of science fiction, fantasy, horror, comics, and gaming. Content warning: at some point in this conversation, we may discuss details of sexual abuse and harassment. To discuss this with us today, we have two fantastic guests. First, she's one of the convention chairs of Atlanta's very own Multiverse Convention, a tireless advocate for equality and inclusion in all spaces, and our good friend, Allie Charlesworth. How you doing, Allie?
Hey there, Rob. Thanks for having me on.
And also with us, she's a writer, illustrator, associate editor of Pseudopod Horror Podcast, an abuse survivor advocate and community cultural analyst and counselor. Maggie Mayshield. How you doing, Maggie?
Hey, what's up? Thanks for having me.
We appreciate you guys coming to the show. How you guys been doing it? How you been doing today, Allie?
We're sort of hanging in there. This new normal is very abnormal. So,
Right.
yeah.
Ain't that the truth?
Right.
hmm
How about you, Maggie? How was your day today?
Pretty good. Pretty lazy, actually. This is the only thing I had to
Nice.
do today.
Right. Good.
Wow.
That has
We
got
got
to
a
be a
lot
good
of
feeling.
right.
You stay pretty busy. I know you have a
Oh,
lot of
yeah.
irons in the fire. You write under. I know your Twitter handle's Schill. That's
hmm
what you write under too. And I see you on there all the time. You put out some great stuff today. On the topic we're talking about. Actually, that was
Right.
an excellent thread. So
Because
folks that go
another
follow.
abuser was outed.
Unfortunately,
Right.
yes.
Unfortunately. Mm.
It's nonstop. But yeah, just quick plug. Follow Schill on Twitter. She's a really good follow for very handy information and insight. But yeah, thanks y'all for both being on here. And we're obviously talking about a really important topic. It's getting a lot of attention lately, but like it still definitely needs more spotlight on it because, as you
Right.
said, there's just a nonstop stream of people being outed and terrible stuff coming to light because harassment and abuse in the world of our fandom, unfortunately, is extremely widespread. Um,
Mm.
so that's but unfortunately the answer to I kind of wanted to ask a question to as a way to start this off is I think the answer is unfortunately pretty clear, but just to give people a sense of the scale of the issue that we're talking about, how widespread and pervasive is this problem of harassment and abuse in the fandoms and industries of like science fiction, fantasy, horror, comics, gaming? Maggie, what do you see as the scale of it, and how people perhaps inaccurately perceive that scale?
I believe this. I've been saying this like all day in the last 500 years of my life, until nauseum. That it is a feature of the community, not a bug. It is
Mm.
not rare. If you don't see it happening, it's because you're in a position to where you don't have to worry about it. If you're in a position to where you're vulnerable to it, you don't go anywhere within the community without touching you in some way, if that makes sense.
It does. It reminds me of the another a problem like a way that plays out like professionally, especially for largely for women who are faced with just knowing that professional events, conventions, and things like that are hotbeds of this kind of activity. So a lot of
Right.
times there's just a general fear of even attending, and these are places where professional relationships can be formed and book deals can be signed, and a lot can happen, and it seems like women are largely shut out of it or can be because they have a very legitimate fear of walking into the lion's den, so to speak.
hmm
Right. I mean, as a male,
Hmm.
I can't fully understand at all what a lot of women go through in the industry. But as a black man, I can tell you I can understand how it feels for someone else to not understand what you're going through, and
Right.
it's something that I think people really have to get on board with, or it's I mean the rest of life is going to pass them by, and a lot of people are going to be hurt in the process.
In
Yeah.
reality, like as writers and creatives, we're told when we go to conventions that the bar con is where you network. But the BarCon is also where Mike Cole admitted to sexually molesting a woman, you know,
At least one, right? I
at
mean, there were,
least once.
yeah.
That he admitted to. I won't say anything he hasn't admitted to because that wouldn't be fair. But
Right.
Right.
that he admitted to. That's well, we were talking before we started that I host a tea party that's basically a Scotch drinking party, and that was really started as my go around to the con. I have a bar con that I control, and I bring in people I want to network with, tempting them with expensive scotches, so I don't get
Which sounds like
molested.
Which
oh
is
god,
great. But again, then that excludes other people that you may or may not know that you want to know, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
it should just be safe to do that anywhere.
Yeah. Period.
right, yeah, like that seems like the the point is that this, like, it just shouldn't be something anyone has to fear, especially not because these are in a lot of ways professional events. I mean, they're fun, there's a party atmosphere, but that's so often used as an excuse. And people just, I don't know whether it's that people are unaware of how widespread harassment in those environments is, or whether they just don't want to see it. But it's something I think pretty much every guy knows, is that they don't know a single woman, not one, who they can ask, have you ever been subjected to harassment? It's only a matter of when and the
It's
extent.
a damn shame.
Yeah,
It-
Well,
there's
and that's
Go ahead.
part of it, right? That's what Maggie was saying is it's built in. It's actually built into the entire culture, not just in fandom, but just in this country completely.
Right.
In fandom, it's really largely embedded because it started out being gate kept, right? By a certain subset. And if you don't fit into a very particular box, you are not invited.
Right.
Right, and you think that kind of gatekeeping allowed that culture to just become a petri dish and grow the kind of like nasty culture that unfortunately exists? Like, you think the gatekeeping was the start of it?
I think it plays into it, right? I think that more than anything else, a lot of men don't think that what they're doing is a problem. It's the excuses you get when someone gets called on it. I how am I supposed to compliment a woman then? Can I not even say something nice anymore? I didn't mean anything by that. And the problem is maybe you didn't, but if there's a power differential that takes it to the level of harassment and not just an unwanted overture.
Like, no woman is offended if you tell her your hair looks nice.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
women are offended at or uncomfortable by the implication of, I am checking to see whether or not you're sexually viable to me at this moment.
Right.
Right.
Right. Anything that hints at that's what's behind the comment or whatever. And yeah, that's so I can see how gatekeeping just created it. Like, this is a boys club, and we're going to be this way, and now we get to decide. And y'all know us, we're no fans. Rob and I are no fans of gatekeeping just as a concept at all
No.
within fandom.
No.
And that's one of the nastier aspects of it, is how it creates that kind of environment. And that, I heard it said pretty well. Actually, Maggie, I wouldn't be surprised if it was you that said it, about when people have what Allie said, those excuses of like, well, I didn't know that was going to offend, or what's the problem with that? How am I supposed to compliment a woman? I've heard several people say, and I agree with this, if you can't answer that question definitively and confidently for yourself, then don't do it. Like, you don't get to do it until you know the answer to that question without any doubt.
Okay, would your compliment get you punched in the face if you said it to a man?
Right.
Exactly. Right.
Right.
If that man worked for you, if you were his boss and you said that to him,
how would
it make
react?
him feel? Yeah.
Because I like your haircut is pretty safe.
Right.
Regardless.
Exactly.
But nice tits, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, really.
I mean,
if you're not sure about it, keep your damn mouth shut. Like, if you think, if you're like, is this gonna? I don't know if this is okay. Well, then it's not. If it's a question, the answer is no.
Yes.
Well, let me ask a question. Why aren't most people cognizant? Like, why don't they think about what they say? It bothers me. I can't wrap my mind around how someone saying that think they're going to get a good reaction out of it. Like,
Um,
and then
if
making the
yeah.
excuse that, hey, I'm just, what am I supposed to say? How am I supposed to talk to a woman? Like she's a human fucking being.
hmm If
I don't get why that's hard.
I could be honest, I believe the
Please.
argument of what am I supposed to say is disingenuous.
Hmm.
Right.
Everyone,
Right.
because they don't make that mistake when the power differential is against them.
Right. Right.
They don't get in trouble then. A lot of the times, these comments, which we kind of call negging
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
comments, like "you're pretty attractive for an older woman,"
Wow.
Right.
or "I usually don't like fat chicks," stuff like
Wow.
Yeah.
that.
Mm.
That's negging. It is made to put you back in your place. It is a liken to when someone tells a black man he's articulate. I
Right.
wasn't
Yeah.
expecting that.
Gotten that a lot.
It's put
Yeah.
you back in your
Absolutely.
place. It's know
Right.
your place, girl.
Hmm.
Wow.
It's
Wow.
made to make you uncomfortable, and some people, like we're talking about the guy that earlier that just got outed today, uh, Tim Miller,
Yeah.
because there are now screenshots of him doing unspeakable things and sending videos to women of him doing unspeakable things,
Hmm.
evidence of it.
Yeah.
It's like a flasher on the bus. It's about I know I'm getting off on how I'm controlling your emotions right now and making you uncomfortable.
Hmm.
Right. Which is sick, frankly. Um,
Yeah.
and there is kind of raises another question about how, like, is that I agree that that's a disingenuous argument to say, well, how am I supposed to, you know how to talk to
Right.
human beings, you're just
Right.
choosing
hmm
how to talk to a certain subset of human beings in this
Right.
way because you want a certain reaction. It's not
Right.
because you don't know how.
Yes.
But there, I think, for not speaking for, like, about the abusers themselves, but for people
Mm-hmm.
in the community who need to know more about how this stuff works. I think there are a lot of things that people have said that they didn't really consider, or they never thought about as being instances of harassment or inappropriateness, or even abuse. Like, for example, consensual relationships where there's a significant power differential within an
Mm-hmm.
industry. That's something it seems like a lot of folks didn't, it just never really considered, because it's just, maybe has it always just been done that way. And so I was wondering, like, what are there? Do you think of any, like, lesser known ways like that? The things that people don't think of as, like you were saying earlier on Twitter. It's not a leering, creepy looking guy skulking around the outsides of the Barcon. It's like
Right.
there's other stuff going on that people may not recognize.
hmm
Do you think of any way, like, any things that people need to be on the lookout for and to be able to recognize that maybe haven't been um, quite so blatant examples of harassment?
So there are plenty of them out there, right? So if I am a prominently placed artist, and I gatekeep who gets to put their art where at the art show that I, you know, am curating for a convention. But I also am making suggestive comments to someone off to the side, not on the, art show time. It's at BarCon or wherever else. That's a problem. Anywhere somebody has a power differential like that, it's
Mm-hmm.
always a problem. If I
Mm-hmm.
affect whether you get an opportunity to progress in your field, um, or gatekeep who you talk to, or talk about you behind your back, you know.
Mm-hmm.
hmm
If I am the more prominent person, then I really shouldn't be engaging in those behaviors with you, no matter what. Just
Just
not
being
not at an event.
cognizant.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Um,
Yeah, like, even if it's not like, technically an employer employee situation, the same dynamic still applies. And you think, I mean, the same standards should apply, it seems like, because it is at that point a more powerful person taking advantage of a less powerful person due to their
hmm
relative positions within the industry. And
Yeah.
that's at the very least unethical, even if it's consensual. And
Right.
in a lot of cases, I think unethical would be a very, very light way to state that.
If
well,
you
and even
don't
if it's
have the
consensual, it might not be uncoerced, right?
Right.
hmm
That's the part.
Because if you don't have the power to say no, there's no consent. Consent
Right.
Right.
has to have the ability to say no.
Hmm.
Right.
And if you're afraid to say no, we're not in a consenting situation anymore.
True.
Oh, I see what you mean about how it involves not simply saying no, but the the reasonable belief that you can without consequence. The reason you
Hmm.
Right.
can, the
Mhm.
belief that you can say no without consequence, because that really that's just as important as actually saying no, is whether or not that was truly an option to begin with.
Hmm.
Right.
Exactly.
Which it complicates complicates consent a little bit, but not to the point where it's so complex that anyone should be misunderstanding this with the slightest bit of thought put into it. I
It's
think.
like there was a recent abuser that was outed, and one of his abuser stories was she worked a workshop for him, and she went up to his room to get her money to get paid for doing a job for him.
Oh
And
man.
while he's holding her money, he propositions her.
Hmm.
Oh
Oh,
God, that's
That it's like,
that's
well, she had the ability to say no, and she did say no, but she was afraid to say no, and she was afraid of what was going to happen to her, even though she did say no and take her money and run.
Hmm.
that's still coercive and manipulative and wrong to do.
that's
And
disgusting.
he
It's
had
fucking
to have
disgusting.
known. Who doesn't know that
Yes.
you don't do
Right.
that?
No, that's
Absolutely.
that's what you would, if you were writing a textbook, literally a textbook on
Right.
Creep.
examples
Yeah.
of yeah, if
Yeah.
you are writing a new dictionary entry for a creep, yeah, you'd have the guy holding the money and saying, "Hey, do this."
Yeah,
Yeah,
give me a kiss,
It's
sweetheart, you know?
yeah.
Right.
How do you not know that's okay? And that's sort of like feigned the feigned innocence, that I didn't know thing, that comes through in a lot of like these people that are outed for abusive behavior when they do their quote apologies. And I'm air quoting that because it's so rarely actually an apology. Um,
it's bullshit. It's
it's
bullshit.
bullshit.
It's
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 bullshit.
usually
And
just
performative.
a
that's what it
load of
is.
shit, very
Right.
performative, and
Very.
but that's
And they're
like,
bad actors. They're horrible actors.
oh no, it's so like it's selfish, it's insincere, it deflects a lot of the blame. It's super manipulative
It
most of the time.
gaslights the victims usually.
It
Right.
Oh,
does.
absolutely. Or
Absolutely.
find subtle ways
Absolutely.
to try to shift blame onto them.
They're
What
doing the
I
same
say,
thing.
I wouldn't mind just getting your take, you Allie and Maggie, getting your take on those apologies, because that's something that I think has surprised a lot of folks, including
Right.
the
Right.
abusers who have made those apologies. They're
Right.
shocked at the reaction, like, what, everyone didn't immediately turn around and decide I'm great again.
Right.
But what do you think about, like, how do these apologies go wrong, and how, if someone sincerely wants to be better, how can they do that right, or what can they do then?
That's a complicated question. I've written entire articles on performative contrition before,
Hmm.
as a survivor advocate.
Yeah.
So this is that's like its own podcast in of itself. But from my
Mm,
point of view, it is about what does the apology focus on? Who's centered? Are
Hmm.
you centering your apology on how I affected you? I recognize what I have done has affected you, or are you focusing it on I recognize that your feelings were hurt by this thing that I've done, and I feel bad that it hurt you, and you're focusing it on your own feelings,
right.
or you're
Yep.
focusing it on this idea of almost like me doing this bad thing. It was a growing thing for me, and uh it helped me grow as a person and learn, as if
So
Oh
thank
women
God.
you.
are
Oh.
side quests in your mediocre male
Right.
leveling
Or
up
peachy.
Right.
hero's journey here. I'm a side
Oh.
quest.
Oh God.
Jeez.
My traumatic moment was your growth. Thanks.
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
Well, and understanding that your actions have consequences. I
Hmm.
No one is required to forgive you, no
mhm.
matter how good your apology is. Nobody's
No.
Right.
required to say, that's okay, you're welcome back in this space now. If you do the thing in a space and you're asked to leave the space, nobody has to let you back in.
Well, can I ask a question? What
Hmm.
Sure.
what why is it when people actually get in there and they show displeasure about the offender, they get labeled as social justice warriors and white knights? All of that really kind of pisses me off, because why would it be a bad thing for anyone to say, no, what that dude did was wrong? and they get labeled and they get almost pushed back. Those people get pushed back from wanting to have a voice and standing up and speaking out for victims.
Well, that's like almost its own podcast in itself because you're getting into the complications
Right,
of abuse dynamic.
right,
And what you're dealing with is what sometimes called the abuse apologist.
right.
Um, so you have this really messed up dynamic where so and so says, "I'm so sorry, I did the thing that hurt people," and then you have a slew of people that accept the apology for the
Hmm.
victims on behalf. And
Right,
Right.
then people
right,
who are actually concerned, like the advocates who are concerned for
right,
the victims and the actual victims themselves, say,
right.
"No, this was a horrible apology, and I don't accept." And then they get attacked. You'd almost see this same dynamic mirrored in a household with an alcoholic, you know,
Right. Okay.
where you
Okay. Hmm.
have the father who is abusive say, "Yeah, I know I hit you when I was drunk and I'm sorry," and then the kid
Mm,
being like, "No, it wasn't okay, you messed up my life, Dad," and the mother saying, "Well, he tried his best," and
He
gotcha.
apologized.
yeah,
Gotcha.
you have the same dynamic happening, but you're having it happen on Twitter basically.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
well, on a
Right.
much larger scale too, because
Hmm.
yeah, like
Right. Right.
that's one of the that brings up another big thing. Like I'm glad you gave us the term for it, abuse apologist, because that's another layer of how this works. And really glad you pointed out how this is what always happens on social media: is you got the person comes out and says, "I'm sorry that," they fall into passive voice and say, "I'm sorry that you felt bad for this thing that
Hmm.
happened to you that was done by me,"
Right.
and just shitty apologies, and they don't do a good job of it, and then all their friends come to their rescue and
Hmm.
say, and thank you, like you said, on behalf of the victims, and say, "This, I know you're a good guy, I know you're trying to be better, this is thank you for doing this," and then and just assume that should be enough. And that kind of enabling, especially within these communities of fandom, I don't know why it sometimes seems to almost be more like entrenched. Like people dig in their heels harder
Right.
on within
Yeah.
these fandom communities, especially when it deals with someone who's like a well-known creator, an author, or artist, or something.
Hmm.
Um, People are just fairly rabid to defend them. Do y'all think that's because it's people kind of protecting their own association with that person?
Mm,
Where do you think that comes from?
Yes. That's
Yeah.
what my blanket.
Definitely.
Yes, it's what I say.
wow.
It's a feature, not a bug.
Hmm.
Uh, goes back to the age of Asimov, and
Hmm.
like Harlan Ellison,
Oh,
and you know what I mean.
Mm,
This is
Yeah.
where bad actor does thing, and you have to basically ignore the bad thing because this is our meal ticket, or we've already invested so much into
wow.
this one guy, we
hmm.
can't afford to lose. But you'll see this repeat. A lot of the artists in SFF that got outed,
Mm,
people aren't very quick to speak up against them because like probably have a lot of money invested in these shows, these
mhm,
conventions, and it
mm.
it's hard because they're embedded in there like a tick basically. So maybe you don't want to speak out against them yet. Maybe you want to wait to see how the winds are, see if it's
Well,
safe.
and I think there's probably multiple layers, right? So you can be attached to a creator and their creations, right? Like I really love this piece of art that this person did, and now I know this thing about them. And can I still keep my art? I don't know. And I
Hmm.
know you guys have touched on that in another episode, but
Right.
separating the creator and the creation, and then you have people like Maggie said, financially bound to this person in some way or another. They're
Right.
patrons. Um, and also, I think a lot of people really just like the sort of, I don't know, positive reinforcement of being able to go, oh, I know you, and I know you're such a
Yes.
good person, and I wouldn't be friends with you if you weren't a good person. So clearly, my experience with you overrides any of this other stuff. So surely
There's
you're
no
fine
logic
now.
in that.
It's
There's no
almost
logic in that.
self-condemning. It
Right.
It
condemns
is.
you. I
It
attached
does.
myself to you and now you're bad.
Right.
Does that mean I'm
Right.
bad?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
No, it just
Yeah.
yeah,
So I
it
guess
means that this person that did a bad thing happens to be someone you thought you knew and you don't know that person. So you need to turn around and say, "Hey, what did you do? You did something bad. You need to go fix it and apologize or do what you need to do now, and I don't need to associate myself with you." I guess it comes down in those situations where people have a lot of money invested in the other person is, would you prefer to go with what you've put in? And I know how complex that is. You guys
Mm-hmm.
have explained how complex that is, because when we're talking about money, we're talking about a lot of money that they've put into these people, investing into these people, and even time and status. I still can't see in my head how someone can say, yeah, I put money into this person, but what they did was wrong. It's not hard to do that, right?
Hmm.
It can't
Yeah,
be.
You're
it
assuming
may.
morality.
I
Not
am.
to
I
be
am.
not be an ass, but you assume ethics and
Right.
morality.
Maybe I'm transferring my own abilities, or my own feelings onto how I feel they should do, and that's probably not. It's gonna drive me mad. It's probably gonna
You're
There,
drive me
setting the
mad to
yeah.
do
bar
that.
way too high, Rob. Way too
Yeah.
high.
I mean,
Right.
not to
Right.
be like a total ass, but there are people in this world and in this
Right.
fandom who will look at a situation saying, "Yeah, what you did was objectively bad, but
Right.
this you still benefit me."
Right.
Yeah,
Shit.
Absolutely.
exactly. I think a lot of
Man.
times there is that there's that defense just because it's like you're my meal ticket, like you're how I get
Hmm.
access to these publishers or
Hmm.
these art shows or whatever. And yeah, what you did was bad. I feel bad for the person that you did it to, but I
Right.
still got to make my money at that show this
Wait to
Mm.
fall.
see who speaks up last. Who
Yeah.
speaks up? This is the same thing that happened in abuse dynamics in women's shelters. The family
Mm.
member who speaks up last about, like, oh, yes, that man was so abusive, is the person that was benefiting from their association the most to the
Wow.
abuser.
Hmm.
Wow.
Because they were the most reluctant to give it up.
And
That's
then
yeah.
they're very vocally like, yes, this person is bad. Because they're almost
Hmm.
Mm.
compensating for how long they hung onto that ship before they fled.
Right.
Yep.
Right, they're trying to make up for being enablers or even complicit in it up to that
Because
point.
they're
Hmm.
self-serving, thus they
Right.
now
Hmm.
have to really distance themselves because it's about self survival at that point and preservation.
Right.
Mm.
And so there's like one of the thing that we noticed pretty early on when the most recent firestorm in this fandom, people being outed and everything. That so many of these scenarios happened at conventions,
Right.
and Allie's one of the chairs of Multiverse convention. Full disclosure, I'm the other one.
Hmm.
Um, so like I'm not gonna sit here and not gonna sit here and hide the association.
Right.
But yeah, so we think in terms of convention stuff like that. That's and just seeing we hated to see that that so much of this was happening at conventions. So what how you were talking today on Twitter, Maggie, about
Hmm.
how the problem with conventions, and I think it's kind of close to what we were just talking about with people's investment in the personalities or in the person, I think, as you put it.
Hmm.
um, what do you think about the situation? Like what do conventions need to be doing or not doing with regard to creating the safe kind of space that should exist for this fandom?
Okay, full disclosure, I did used to do community culture, like counseling. Basically, go into
Mm.
a nonprofit and help them like structure like what are your values and what can you do to make your policies reflect your values as possible, much as closely as possible.
Mm.
And the first thing that you usually tell an organization is whatever your mission statement is, look at your mission statement, read it. Whatever it is, when you're under extreme stress, you will do the antithesis of it. If you say, we are inclusive, under stress, you will become insular. If you say,
Mm.
I want everyone's voice to be heard here, the minute you get a really shocking abuse claim, you're going to quiet people down. That's going to be your automatic reaction. You need to be cognizant of that. Read your mission statement and know, and don't think you're special, basically. Don't think you're the
Hmm.
exception to this rule. This is a
Mm.
sociologically observed fact of
Yeah.
Right.
human nature and
Mhm.
especially organizational nature.
Right.
A lot of women's shelters, if they are when they are under duress, they start acting like an abusive husband. They start gaslighting, minimizing, messing with people's reality, and it's simply because they will revert back to whatever is the antithesis of their mission statement. Be cognizant of that. And once you're cognizant of that, you can start making policy to combat that.
Okay.
Yeah, it seemed like one of the things you were saying earlier is to go ahead is to that conventions and other events of that type, the kind of places where this kind of thing can happen, should get on it now, as far as
Yeah.
right, like have a concrete plan in place for how you're going to deal with it when you get confronted with that uncomfortable situation, because you're not special and you're not immune to it, and
Yeah.
you're not the one place where this is never going to happen.
And it not be generic, because every con has wonderful generic abuse policies. Like, if you see abuse, come report it to me. Or come report to our HR. They have wonderful generic. I'm talking about, because the generic is made with the idea of the greasy-haired, dirty t-shirt creeper that no one knows. I'm telling you right now, that guy probably isn't going to abuse you, because that guy came to the con alone, and he has no insulation to abuse you. I mean, he's the easy villain. If he does something wrong, he'll get in trouble. Who the person who's going to abuse you is the celebrity author, the artist guest of honor, the favorite volunteer, the guy who's in the clique with all the con chairs, the guy. Think of whoever has the most insulation, and that statistically is the person most likely to abuse, because he can get away with it and he knows it in this atmosphere. I'm not saying every guest of honor is an abuser, by the way. That's
Right. Yeah.
I've heard nothing but good things about Brandon Sanderson.
Just him. He's the only one. So all
He's the only
conventions,
one.
that's the only one you're ever allowed to invite anymore.
Yes.
Brandon, you're welcome.
Thank you. We love you.
So having a very specific plan in place is what you're saying ahead of time before anything happens, and say, you know, I don't care if you're the guest of honor. If you do something like this, then you are going to be removed from the convention space.
And this is how I word it. Like, you have your generic, if someone I don't know abuses someone policy. But I want to, like, almost encourage cons to make, what is the guest of honor grope someone in the bar policy? How do you, what is your policy for handling the artist that is renowned for groping women and touching without their permission beforehand?
Can I share my policy? Hand on collar, foot on ass.
Can I share mine?
Yes.
Sure.
Don't invite him if you know that he's that.
There. Yeah.
Bingo.
Because
do some vetting, and
now
the stories are out there.
They are, but there is a whisper network,
everywhere.
right? There's a whisper network, and you have to get plugged in, which is kind of scary, because people's livelihoods are threatened again by the power that some of these. Yeah,
I think it was the anime cons got hit with this really hard with that Vic guy that does
yeah.
He had so many chaperones. They had security like emergencies when they couldn't find him, because he was that renowned to be sexually harassive and assaultive toward females. Don't invite him. No one is so important that they are not replaceable.
Right.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true. There are so many good people that would jump at the chance to be a guest of honor at a convention, and who would get, I mean, what I think is that people go after a while, they mostly go to conventions once they're established for the family aspect of it, the social aspect. Like, they want to see their friends, and they like the activities, they like the way that it's set up. It's not because you've got the biggest, most famous person around. And even if you might draw a few more people to your convention by having that bigger name, but if you're going to the extent where, well, it's like you said, they're replaceable. Anybody's replaceable. You can find somebody on their level who's not a dick, who doesn't have this kind of history. They're out there, and they're probably, one of them's available. And even if you have to take a little bit of a step down in terms of the fame meter or whatever, even if you have to do that, big deal. You're preventing people from being abused. Okay, that's worth it. Take that quote step down and have a good person, because that's actually a huge step up. So do it that way.
And if we're going to talk about like some restorative justice with this, you know who are geniuses, who are wonderfully talented? A lot of the victims of these people who were forced out of places at the table.
Yep.
And I kind of mourned for all, like, they're like, oh, no, we can't replace this one writer. He's a genius. I was like, but what about that writer girl he made it where she didn't want to go to cons anymore? She's a genius. What about her genius? Did we lose one of the greatest novels that was ever written because some jerk was negging a woman who was his greater and he was her lesser.
Right.
Mhm.
Which I think it's statistically impossible that has not happened. Like
Mm-hmm.
that
Yep.
it's a certain thing in my mind that we have lost out on a lot of great works, and even like a great artist, like people who would have produced an entire body of wonderful work, but got shut out and didn't get that first book deal that would have gotten them with the publisher that really backed them from that point on. They got shut out and because somebody just had to be terrible and they were afraid to come back after that for
Mm-hmm.
good reason.
I'm
Yeah.
so angry. I'm so
There,
angry.
You're
there
allowed
was
to
at
be. You
least
should be angry.
one. Absolutely, there was at least one artist who did. She left the industry
Mm-hmm.
because of the sexual harassment she endured at the hands of someone who has been a guest of honor at many cons, I believe,
Yep.
at this
Mm,
point. So
And all these women, like especially these artists with these men who've been outed in the SFF art community, looking at their portfolios, I'm like, damn,
yeah,
can I
right,
like I work with Pseudopod and Escape Artist, like, damn, can I just write a proposal that, hey, as a pro market, can we use these ladies for things?
yeah,
mm-hmm.
yep,
Some restorative justice. They should be making the money. Like
yeah,
if they cared about true contrition, it would be removing themselves from the table and giving the
Right.
seat to the people that they damaged to restore them.
Right.
right,
Right. Apologies are words, like let people actually try to give back whatever small piece you can of what you took.
Right.
It's never, I believe never can be truly fully restorative, of course, but
Hmm.
it's but a half-assed apology is literally the least you can do other than
Right.
simply ignoring it.
And every time I
Um,
complain about apologies that people give, they're like, well, what kind of apology is good enough? And I just get caught in the cycle of, well, I think that what you're asking me is, what does this man have to say for the consequences to go away?
Right.
right,
They'll
And
never go away.
never. I mean, he's in trouble. He's not a
Right.
child. He's a grown man. Let him be in
Right.
trouble.
Like
He feels
right.
scared. He feels scared right now, and he feels vulnerable, and he feels shame. In order for healing to happen, from an abuse counselor standpoint, the transfer of pain and shame must happen from victim to abuser. It has
Right.
to go back to him
yep,
because
Right.
he gave it to her. It needs to transfer back now.
Right.
That's the
Has become
only way this
transference.
happens.
Right.
Right. So an abuser in that scenario is simply going to have to sit with it. And it sounds kind of like is what you're
Right.
saying is
Hmm.
they simply have to deal with the fact that they screwed up and there may be nothing they can do to fix it. And they're going to have to endure a little bit of what they inflicted. And that's just how it is. Like they don't get a guaranteed, like Ali was saying, they don't get a guaranteed way back
Yes.
in. No one's required to forgive them or let them back into the group.
Right.
I think that's absolutely right. And the same thing with, as convention planners, that is, I think that's got to be another thing too, is that you don't, I mean, at what point can you reasonably take the risk? Like, okay, this guy did something bad 5 years ago, but he's probably okay now. Like, no, we, as event organizers, you've got a responsibility to a lot of people who are
Hmm.
coming to
mhm,
your convention.
yeah,
And
Mm,
there's not a way to say, well, this person did something bad a while ago, but I think he's probably fine now. He seems like he's gotten better. Like, that's not a chance that I think that event planners should take. You
It,
just can't
right.
take that risk
it's
because
also
it
a
could
form of
affect so many people.
apologists.
it
That's
is, yeah,
usually
Mm,
the method that that an abuse apologist takes, and this is when you're getting into the finer details of dynamics of abuse, codependency.
right.
This is like that's my counselor terminology. But the codependency dynamic is, codependents are trained by abusers to basically run interference. Um, Basically, an abuser is never allowed to feel their feelings, and you're
Mm,
actually doing a great disservice to these men who are fragile. They are underdeveloped as human beings. They are
mm,
insecure. Never
mm-hmm.
allowing them to feel vulnerable, scared, weak.
Right.
People are entitled to their feelings, but abusers train these codependents to basically make it to where they never have to feel the bad things.
yeah,
Mm,
You're not a full person until you can sit with the bad things and come
right.
up from it.
That's a really good point, and
It
that's something that
is.
it seems like the entire community, top to bottom, whether it's fans or publishers, artists, or their friends, or podcasters, convention organizers, whoever, has got to be a society. The entire society has to shift culturally so that it's known that if you do this, you're going to have to actually sit with this. You're going to actually
Right.
you're going to feel the bad feelings because there are not enough people here to protect you, and that's not how it's done anymore. That's like turning a battleship. But
Mhm.
if you Allie, or you Maggie, have any ideas on how to begin turning that battleship in addition to what
Right.
we've already talked about, then please let us know, because
Right.
it's got to start happening.
It
I mean,
does.
abusers aren't made in a vacuum. Let get this really clear. Abusers are not created in a vacuum. These are our monsters. They're ours. We own them. We own the victims, but we own them. You
Right.
know, from abuse counseling standpoint, every abuser was a victim of abuse. Someone created that.
Right.
Every abuse victim goes on to be an abuser. It's just most of us abuse ourselves.
Mm.
Oh,
So
Mm.
ouch.
what
That
Wow.
is
was
Wow.
relatable.
happening with the other kind is
Oof.
they go on to abuse others. We
Hmm.
created them. They're our responsibility. And the people they hurt is our responsibility, because if you do not restore the victim, they turn into an abuser. Either they abuse themselves or they go on to abuse others, or both.
Hmm.
So now we're
Um,
dealing with really complex societal issues.
right.
We own all of this.
Right.
That's a
It's,
fascinating point about how we have to take care of and restore the survivors of this kind of abuse, because they will, like you said, eventually abuse themselves or other people. I've never heard it put like that before, but it
I
like
haven't
that
either.
really strikes home. And that's maybe something that a lot of there needs to be more focus on too, because it does tend to take up all the oxygen in the room when you're talking about this famous person that did the thing. Like, that's the conversation gets centered around that a lot of the time, and sometimes that's because the survivor of whatever they did may not want to be in the spotlight.
Mhm.
But it makes me
Right.
wonder, is there any effort really being put toward, or enough thought being put toward, how to make them right again, you know? uh,
Hmm.
Not a lot. Usually, there's no thought to prevent it, because we talk about taking care of victims and restoring victims. You're talking about future prevention of abuse. Not only
Hmm.
is the victim not going to turn into an abuser of others and themselves, you're making it to where future abusers see, hey, this is a platform. If I abuse someone, I don't win, and my victim gets all the attention that I wanted. So you're turning it
huh.
into a preventative measure. And most policies
Wow.
don't talk about prevention. They talk about, like, the wet works, clean it up after
Right.
someone
Hmm.
was already assaulted.
Right.
Right, and I guess that's a. I'm curious about that, because I'm very interested to see what kind of prevention there can be, like from the point of view, like I said, so many of these things happen at conventions. Um, like, what can be done preventatively? I believe there are ways, like having those policies in place are really good, but those are still reactive in nature.
Vetting, like Ali said. I
Well,
mean, like you
vetting,
guys
yes,
said. Yeah. Right. I mean,
absolutely.
just
Yeah,
like
like Ali said.
making, yeah,
Hmm.
making sure that the people that you're going to invite to your con aren't abusers, or if they are, don't invite. You know what I mean? I think
Hmm.
it sounds like common sense, right? But like, I there's so much more entangled in it. I mean, I can see now how you guys have laid it out, how it's so complex, and there's a bunch of different levels to it. You can't just grab a person up and throw them out. You have to let it be known. You have
Hmm.
to help their
Hmm.
victims. You have to make sure that what's happening is the right thing for the victims, and the people that are speaking out for the victims that are advocating. You have to make sure you have strong advocacy. You have to make sure that all of those things are in place, and like MM said, you have to make sure that you stick by your mission statement 100%, no matter what. You
There's no
can't.
quick fix to this either.
Right,
No,
right,
Right.
Like, this is a cultural issue, and cultural
it is.
issues, you can only get incremental change toward a goal, and that
right,
goal, it might not be solvent. It's always a moving thing. Like any
Hmm.
organization or culture, it's a moving goal.
right.
So you ultimately, I use this example sometimes when I talk about this, um, about culture. If you went to a wedding, you know it is inappropriate to show up in a bathing suit to a black tie wedding, right?
Right.
You just know it. You wouldn't do it. Only the most divergent among our society would show
Hmm.
up to a black tie wedding in a bathing suit, and they'd stick out and then they'd be ejected.
Right.
You want to create your culture to where it's a no duh, you don't do this here. And that's a
Right.
Right.
slow change of culture of mindset, but you can get there. What you're basically doing is trying to construct a culture to where doing the ethical thing is easier than doing
Mhm.
the unethical, to where we don't have to
Right.
worry about if so and so's daddy never loved them and now they abuse other people, because they wouldn't dare try to abuse someone in this culture setting.
Right.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that's it. There's still obviously a ton of work to be done. I'm glad that the conversation is happening in general. It's never a pleasant one, but people are talking and people are not backing down from it, and that's good because everybody deserves to be able to enjoy conventions and events
Hmm.
and the fandom in general without fear.
Hmm.
That's what we all want. Like this is a really serious topic, but we're fans of what we're fans of because it's fun and we like it and we like the
Right.
community and we want it to not be toxic and dangerous for anybody who wants to be part of it. So hopefully we'll be able to get there
I think
someday.
we're getting there because there's
I
this
do
positive
too.
happening right now, because everyone's like, "Oh, there's so many abusers happening." The same amount of abusers that are like where they're getting exposed now, but they were already always there. It's not
Exactly.
like they just
Mm.
materialized. There have always been that many abusers, and for every one you see, it's like cockroaches. There's 20 in the wall.
Hmm.
So
Wow.
the fact that all of these women are coming forward, it shows there is a cultural shift happening. Women
Right.
aren't as afraid that their careers will be destroyed if they speak about the artist that propositioned them or the writer that molested them in a bar. They're not afraid out for their career. That means there's a cultural shift happening to where people aren't going to be as quiet, which makes a culture that is more dangerous for people who express predation toward others.
Hmm.
Right.
And it should be. Is that what you're seeing too, Allie? I know you have a lot of conversations around this community. Are you seeing a similar shift starting to happen?
Oh, quite definitely. You know, like Maggie was saying, it's not that this hasn't been happening since the beginning of science fiction fantasy conventions. They've always been
Right.
there.
Right.
We just all knew to shut up and not say anything, right?
Be a good girl.
Because
Mm.
yeah, yeah, go over there and just deal with it because that's just how that guy is, and we know him, and he's okay.
Hmm.
Um,
It's
but
ridiculous.
now it is, Rob, but it really is exactly how it is. I'm not even immune to it. There have been a couple of times,
Wow.
Jesse can tell you, where someone has said something inappropriate to me and I blew it off because, oh, that's just so and so. And he's like, well, you wouldn't blow it off if it was him saying it to someone else. I'm
Hmm.
like, you're
Right.
right. I wouldn't.
Right.
Right. Um, so we all have to start paying attention and looking for them and watching for those actions, but then calling it out. Whether it's the
Mm.
victim calling it out, whether it's observers. For God's sake, if it's your friend, doing the harassing, please call it out.
Right.
And that's what's
Yeah.
Um,
hard. Usually it is your friend. And
it
that's what
is,
makes it hard
yeah,
in the con culture. They are part of the clique, and oh.
I
right,
must be a
right.
weirdo
But
because I will completely disregard a person that I've known for years if they did something that I did not stand with morally. Like, I'm probably just a
that's true.
weirdo. I
I know.
would completely disconnect from them, like completely.
Yeah. Rob will do that. And that's
Drop them.
Yeah, but a lot of people won't. But that's what I think personally. Yeah, I think you're both right that that's what's got to start happening is that people
Yeah,
who have a lot at stake and a lot to risk personally still
absolutely.
need to have the courage of their convictions and take that risk. And if they lose out on anything, blame the person that put them in that position.
Right.
Yeah,
That
Right,
seriously.
exactly.
because it's they
That's
try to make this mentality like if I'm good and I deal with the abuse, then they'll allow me half a seat at the table. And I'm just like, bitch, science fiction was invented by a woman. That's your
That's
table.
right.
literally
That's right.
invented. Yes,
Yes.
They're
That's
and
right.
and
keeping
is
it
and
from
is
you.
you could easily argue is currently dominated by women.
Right.
Yes.
Like
Right.
in terms
The
of, I
president of
mean,
SIFWA is a woman. She won 2 Hugos. I mean, N.K. Jemisin won 3 in
Mhm.
a row. This
Right.
is
yeah.
ours.
I
This is
think,
our
in fact,
table.
I think the entire Hugo slate, literary speaking, this year, I think it's 100% women, if I'm not mistaken, this
Mhm.
year. Yeah, so absolutely,
Yeah,
it's your table, and anyone. I think that at this point, there's there are more people there. I would like to believe that there are more people who agree with all of us on this than aren't,
yeah.
and
Right.
hope that people start to realize you can turn on your shitty friends that do bad stuff to people. You're not
Damn
like,
right.
you should do that anyway, but if you do, we'll support you. We're gonna like you
That's right.
better if you take that risk. Risk whatever you have at stake, and shut them down and stop them from doing it, and cut your association with them if you have to. Have the courage of your convictions, and we'll back you up.
Yeah.
Right.
If they're your
So
friend and you call them out, hopefully they listen to you, right? Otherwise, you weren't great friends to begin with.
Hmm?
hold on. I think you skipped out a little bit there, Allie. I think you blocked. Can you say that one more time, please? I'm sorry.
Oh, can you guys not hear me anymore? Ah,
I can now.
I
We
hear
can hear
you
you.
now.
okay. That's bizarre. I am literally sitting in the same spot. No, I just
It
said
happens.
if it is your friend who is doing the abusing and you call them out and they have a problem with that, you weren't great friends to begin with. So you aren't
Right.
really losing a whole lot.
Right.
So,
It was
Yeah.
just there for a second. It sounded like you were giving us this tidbit of knowledge, and then you cut out. I was like, no, I want to know. I want to know. I
it
want
was
to
the
know
It's
answer
what
like
to
that
the
is.
universe and you missed it, Rob. I
Right.
am
Ah.
so
Right.
sorry.
it's
My
I'll
one of
tell
bad.
those.
Maggie later because it's our table though. So
Right. That's right. That's right. You can tell me. You can tell me when you decide to invite me to the table, and I will
that's
gladly
right.
accept that invitation. That's right.
Oh
Nah, you guys
yes,
are always invited to the table.
we appreciate it.
I like getting uncomfortable, and I like that some of this has made me angry, and I like that some of this has made me uncomfortable because I need to understand this. Like, I don't like to hear stories about abuse. I don't like to hear those things, but I need to hear those. I'm a nurse and I'm an advocate myself. I need to hear those things, and I need to be able to figure out how to deal with those things. And I really appreciate the both of you for actually setting aside some time to help us, and not only us, others understand somewhat what's going on. I cannot wait to have you back if you guys have the time to come back and talk with us. I think it was amazing and selfless that you guys shared your time
Oh.
to explain
Aw.
this to us. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you could
Yes.
have like
Absolutely.
30
Thanks for having
podcasts
us.
on this topic.
Oh yeah, no, we were talking about that before we started. That yeah, this is
It's
something that, I
messy.
mean, this could be a
Right.
multi part episode, and we really may want to do some follow ups on this.
I am okay with it.
Because there is plenty more to talk about. We can drill down on
Right.
little topics that you said. Like, there have been dissertations written, like you said, about
Yeah, I've made
10
10
different things that
years
we.
out of this topic. 10 years of my life
Right.
has been
Uh,
finding new angles on this topic and advocacy.
well, hopefully, one
That's
day you'll be
amazing.
out of a job.
That's the goal, is
Right.
to be
Right.
so
Right.
good that I am not needed to do. I would love to. I said this a million times. I would love if my Twitter feed was nothing but the books I'm reading, the writing
Right.
I'm working on,
Right.
pseudopod stuff, my cute little dogs. You
Right.
know, I
If it
want to
could
Right.
post my
just be
dogs.
that. Yeah.
Someone sent me a message, was like, hey man, you talking about Black Lives Matter and all this other kind of stuff. I was like, I don't want to talk about this. I want to talk about video games, and I would like to talk about the books that I'm reading, and I would like to post picture of my kids online and not have to worry about any of it. But
But
I
this bullshit.
understand that. Right, this
Yeah.
bullshit is really just wasting my time. But I will step and fight for anybody who's had any issues. That is my job as a human being, is to be an advocate for other human beings. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
There's
I
just
really, really
not
do
the luxury
appreciate
of.
this. Like, you guys don't understand how much I really appreciate this.
Thank you.
Yes, it's been great.
Anytime.
Thank you both.
Yeah.
Yeah, Allie Charlesworth, Schill, really, really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on to talk about this with us. It's
Yes.
never easy, but you did it, and like Rob
Right.
said, we thoroughly appreciate it. And thanks for giving
Thoroughly.
us your time and your perspectives. Where can people find you online? Maggie, you want to tell them where they can find your stuff?
Currently right now it's really easy on Twitter at mm_Schill, SCHILL. I also have a Patreon and a website of this. It's just my name. Easy to find me on both. Schill.
Yeah,
Google me.
nice and easy. Yes, go find her. You will find her. Allie, you got anywhere you want to direct people to find you online or anything like that?
Really just to the con. It's multiversecon.org. If you guys are interested in sci-fi and fantasy and want to come to a convention who's trying to do the things correctly, we would love
Yep.
to have you there. Elsewhere, you can
Yes.
find me at Allie911. It's ALLIE 911 at Twitter and all of that good stuff. When I'm on there,
All right.
Yeah.
twice every month. So
when you can stand to visit the hell site. Yeah.
Yes,
right.
seriously.
But anyway, yes, thank you both very, very much. We'll let you go, and we'll have you back at some point very soon, we hope. But thank you again very much, and
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks.
talk to you soon.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
All right, Rob, that was man.
That was our heaviest. That was one of our heaviest podcasts.
That was
there,
heavy,
but
man. Yeah,
I
we got pretty
appreciated
deep.
every second of it.
Yes,
It's got me. I've written down a lot and I've absorbed a lot, and
I've been taking notes too.
Right. I can't wait to sit my kids down and teach them these things and how this works. It's a dynamic that needs to be shifted immediately, and like our guest said, I think it is happening. I think we're moving towards the right direction. But
yeah,
man,
it sounds like
I
the
really
conversation is
enjoyed
starting
this.
to. Yeah, it's great. It sounds like the conversation is really beginning to clarify around
Right.
some of these really sticky and difficult points. So
Right.
that was really cool. So, and everybody, yeah, this was one of our heavier episodes. We appreciate everybody listening. We know this is not the happiest of topics, but it's a really, really important one. So we appreciate you sticking with us and listening to Schill and Allie Charlesworth talk about this topic with us. We hope you've gotten something out of it. That's kind of the point here, is we hope that hope you learn a little something and come out of it with maybe a little clarity on this very complicated situation.
Right. We're having the hard and tough conversations you guys listen to, so that we eventually can get to a point where we're not having to have this type of conversation like we discussed earlier.
That's the hope.
That's the hope. That is it.
Yep. So y'all can find us online. You know where to find us by now, glitchypancakes.com. You can stream the episodes there. We're also up on Spotify, Stitcher, Castbox, etc. Still waiting on Apple. Get it together, Apple. Get us approved and put us on Apple Podcast. Just look for us on your favorite podcast app. We're probably on there. Twitter and Facebook at Glitchy Pancakes. If you got questions, suggestions, or comments, send an email to cakespod@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter if you want to at Jesse, JESSE_A_Adams. And Rob, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at EI Blackout. That's IAIBLACKOUT. Join me there. Say hey. I'll say hey back. We might share some pictures and some video game stuff and geek it out a little bit and talk about some serious stuff. Maybe you'll see some serious stuff there.
Maybe not.
Maybe
never
maybe
know.
Not. You never know.
All
It is
right.
day by day.
Thanks for sticking with us, everybody. We will see you next time.
Yeah, take it easy, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.